What I will say is that the president has always remained consistent and that he kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his club at Mar-a-Lago because, frankly, Jeffrey Epstein was a creep.
Epstein's lawyers synopsized and quoted Trump as saying that that Jeffrey Epstein was not a member of his club at Mar-a-Lago, but he was a guest at Mar-a-Lago, and he had never been asked to leave. And that was redacted for some indeterminate, inscrutable reason.
What I will say is that the president has always remained consistent and that he kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his club at Mar-a-Lago because, frankly, Jeffrey Epstein was a creep. And unlike many other people who are named in these files, President Trump cut off his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and was honest and transparent about that for years and years. And so I think what the president has said all along has always remained true. And the release of more than 3 million documents related to Jeffrey Epstein and his heinous, disgusting crimes just shows the level of transparency that this president and administration has committed to in bringing these files to light.
But did he call the chief in 2006? Caroline, did he call the chief?
Look, it was a phone call that may or may not have happened in 2006. I don't know the answer to that question. What I'm telling you is that what President Trump has always said is that he kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his Mar-a-Lago club because Jeffrey Epstein was a creep, and that remains true. And this call, if it did happen, corroborates exactly what President Trump has said from the beginning. And I'm sure many of you, when you read that alleged FBI report, probably thought to yourself, wow, this really cracks our narrative that we've been trying to push about this president for many years. So we're moving on from that.
I went over there and I was able to determine, at least I believe, that there were tons of completely unnecessary redactions in addition to the failure to redact the names of victims. And so that's troubling to us. I saw one document which was an email that was sent by Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell, which was the forward of an email that he had received from some of his lawyers giving an account of a conversation between Epstein lawyers and Trump lawyers and others about what had taken place during that 2009 period. It was during the period of the 2009 investigation. And Epstein's lawyers synopsized and quoted Trump as saying that that Jeffrey Epstein was not a member of his club at Mar-a-Lago, but he was a guest at Mar-a-Lago, and he had never been asked to leave. And that was redacted for some indeterminate, inscrutable reason. I know it seems to be at odds with some things that President Trump has been saying recently about how he had kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his club or asked him to leave, and this was at least one report that appears to contradict.
Ms. Maxwell, were you a close friend and confidant of Jeffrey Epstein?
I would like to answer your question, but on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer this question and any related questions. My habeas petition is pending in the Southern District of New York. I therefore invoke my right to silence under the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
At any point during your personal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, were you aware that Mr. Epstein was sexually abusing minors and adult women?
I would like to answer your question, but on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer this question and any related questions.
During today's testimony, Ghislaine Maxwell read a prepared statement that said that she would testify if President Donald Trump commuted her sentence or pardoned her, and that she would testify that President Trump and former President Bill Clinton didn't engage in any wrongdoing. After that, she invoked her Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and refused to answer any questions from the House Oversight Committee. This was somewhat of a surprise because Maxwell sat down for an interview last year with Todd Blanche, the #2 official at the U.S. Department of Justice. Maxwell, like anyone else, has an absolute right to invoke her right to remain silent, and that's what she did today. It's clear that she is trying to use her knowledge and her association with Jeffrey Epstein and the fact that members of Congress and the American public want answers to try to get a pardon out of President Trump. Now, just like Maxwell has an absolute right to remain silent, Trump has an unfettered right to pardon anyone convicted of a federal crime. It doesn't appear that he is entertaining that possibility, but the president has been very liberal with pardons and somewhat unpredictable. So it's certainly a possibility, even though it doesn't seem very likely.
Maxwell, is the president going to rule out a pardon for her? In her testimony, deposition yesterday, her legal team seemed to be making a case, again, for a pardon from the president.
Again, this is not something I've discussed with the president recently because, frankly, it's not a priority. He's focused on many of the issues that the American people are dealing with and providing solutions to those issues. So I haven't spoken with him recently. Last time we did speak about it, he said it's not something he's considering or thinking about.
I think you understand the root of concern here. It's the way you described very emphatically your first encounter with him in his apartment, said you were disgusted, would never have any contact with him again. Did you, in fact, make the visit to Jeffrey Epstein's private island?
I did have lunch with him as I was on a boat going across on a family vacation. My wife was with me, as were my 4 children and nannies. I had another couple they were there as well with their children, and we had lunch on the island. That is true, for an hour, and we left with all of my children, with my nannies and my wife, all together. We were on family vacation. We were not apart. To suggest there was anything untoward about that in 2012, I don't recall why we did it, but
Mr. Secretary, again, as I said, there's not an indication that you yourself engaged in any wrongdoing with Jeffrey Epstein. It's the fact that you believe that you misled the country and the Congress based on your earlier statements, suggesting that you'd cut off all contact when, in fact, you had not.
A lot of women who are survivors of Epstein's are unhappy with those redactions that came out. Some of them, entire witness interviews are totally blacked out. Do you think that they should be more transparent?
The fact that they thought they released too much. You know, I heard that, and you tell me something else. No, I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else. Really, you know, now that nothing came out about me, other than it was a conspiracy against me, literally by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get onto something else.
What would you say to people who feel like they haven't gotten justice, Mr. President?
Something that people care about. Yeah, what did you say? Go ahead.
What would you say to the survivors?